Before I begin, I want to make something very clear. This video is simply an observation based on my own experiences, conversations I've had with many women over the years, and patterns I've personally witnessed. It doesn't apply to every South Asian family or every mother or every son. There are countless loving, healthy families with wonderful parent-child relationships. This conversation isn't about blaming mothers. It isn't about blaming sons, and it isn't about criticizing South Asian culture. I am South Asian myself. It's about understanding a family dynamic that quietly affects marriages, families, and can even affect future generations. So today, let's talk about mother-son enmeshment. Many people may have never even heard this term before. Mother-son enmeshment is not the same as loving your mother. It's not about respecting your mother. It's not caring for your parents, and it's not living in a joint family. Those things can all be very healthy. Mother-son enmeshment happens when healthy emotional boundaries begin to disappear. It happens when a mother begins relying on her son to meet emotional needs that should be met by other adults or by a broader support system. It happens when a son begins feeling responsible for his mother's happiness, when guilt replaces healthy independence, when a wife feels like there are three people in a two-person marriage. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So to understand why this happens, it's very important to understand the culture many of us grew up in. Things have certainly changed in many tier 1 cities and among many upper middle class and affluent families. More and more women are financially independent, more women are emotionally independent. More couples are creating healthier boundaries, and that's wonderful progress. But across many smaller towns and villages and many more traditional households throughout South Asia, these patterns still exist. And even in modern cities, many adults are still living out emotional patterns they learned decades ago as children. For generations, many South Asian women sacrificed everything for their families. Some had very little emotional support, and some remained in unhappy marriages because divorce wasn't considered an option, it was taboo. Many built their entire identity around motherhood. Their children, especially their sons, became their greatest source of purpose, love, joy, and emotional connection. And most of the time, this wasn't intentional. Let's just call it survival. And that's why this conversation requires compassion, because many of these mothers were also hurting. But understanding where something comes from doesn't mean we ignore the damage it can cause. So let's talk about how it begins. Imagine a little boy watching his mother cry because she's unhappy. Imagine she tells him about problems with his father. She leans on him emotionally. She tells him how lonely she is. Without realizing it, the child learns something very powerful. If mom is hurting, isn't it my job to make her feel better? So he doesn't just love his mother, he begins feeling responsible for her. And that responsibility grows with him. So by the time he becomes an adult, guilt has become a major part of that love. Now let's look at what happens after marriage. Many South Asian mothers genuinely want their sons to get married. Families spend months and years looking for the right bride. The wedding is celebrated, everyone is super excited. But marriage changes the family structure. And that is something that people don't understand or acknowledge. A healthy marriage means that a husband and a wife become each other's primary partners. Not because they stop loving their parents, but because that's the natural progression of marriage. For some families, that transition is celebrated. But for so many others, it feels like a loss. And that's when you start hearing comments like this. शादी हो गई है तो माँ को भूल गया. Which translates to, now that you're married, you've forgotten your mom. Or you may hear, तेरी शादी हो गई है, अब तो हमें भूल जाएगा. Which translates to, now that you're married, you're going to forget about us. So let's pause for a moment. Did this person really forget his mother? Or is he doing what married adults are supposed to do? Building a life with their spouse. Especially in cases where couples don't know each other and have had an arranged marriage. How are they supposed to get to know each other if they don't spend time with each other, if they don't talk to each other, if they don't try to understand each other? And those are two very different things. Another example might sound like this. माँ बेचारी पूरा दिन घर में अकेली बैठी रहती है, which translates to, poor mom sits alone all day. और शाम को तू अपनी बीवी के साथ ही रहता है, which translates to, and when you come home in the evening, you spend the entire time with your wife. Isn't that supposed to be normal? But on the other hand, a mother's loneliness is also very real. So let's try to understand whose responsibility is it to solve it. That's the question that's very important. And one of the defining features of enmeshment is where a son feels personally responsible for fixing his mother's loneliness, her emotional pain, and most importantly, her happiness. Now let's talk about the son. People generally focus on the mother or the wife, but the son in this process is also suffering. He loves his mom, but now that he's married, he also loves his wife. He feels guilty no matter what he does. If he spends time with his wife, he feels like he's neglecting his mom. If he comforts his mother, his wife starts to feel lonely. And he's been taught that being a good son means always making sure that your mom is happy. That's an impossible burden for anyone to carry. Now let's talk about the wife. Many wives enter marriage expecting partnership. Instead, some find themselves feeling like outsiders forever. Not because their husbands don't love them, but because someone else's emotions have become the center of the marriage. Maybe every disagreement gets discussed with mom. Maybe every major decision requires her approval. Maybe the husband spends every evening in his mother's room talking privately while his wife waits for him to spend time with her, and she's all alone. The issue isn't talking to your mother. The issue is emotional intimacy. Who receives your deepest conversations? Who receives your time? Who receives your emotional energy? Marriage is supposed to create a new primary emotional partnership. Another painful experience many women describe is constant comparison. My mother used to cook like this. Her food was better. My mother never complains. My mother managed the entire house. After years of hearing those comments, the wife begins feeling as though she's competing with someone who she was never meant to compete with. A wife is not applying for the position of replacement mother. She's supposed to be appreciated for the person she is. And guess what? Children are impacted too, especially daughters. They watch, they observe, they learn. They see their father constantly prioritizing someone else's emotions. They see their mother staying quiet to keep the peace. They absorb messages about what marriage looks like. Some grow up believing their own needs don't matter. And that's a huge problem. Others become determined to never repeat the pattern. Either way, They are learning. One thing I want to emphasize is this. This conversation is not about telling people to stop loving their parents. It's not about disrespecting mothers. It's not about abandoning family. Healthy families absolutely can be close. Healthy sons can love their mothers deeply. And healthy mothers can remain an important part of their son's life. The difference is healthy boundaries. Healthy love allows children to become independent adults. Healthy love celebrates a son's marriage instead of competing with it. Healthy love doesn't require and should never require guilt. Healthy love doesn't ask a child to carry a parent's emotional burdens. Because the truth is, nobody wins in enmeshment. The mother often feels abandoned. The son feels guilty. The wife feels invisible. The children become confused. Understanding this pattern isn't about assigning blame. It's about breaking cycles. It's about creating healthier families. Families where mothers are loved and respected, but where wives are also valued and appreciated. And where sons don't have to choose between the two. And where the next generation grows up seeing what healthy love looks like. And this is where the next generation grows up seeing what healthy love really looks like. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please remember to keep the conversation respectful. Our goal is awareness, understanding, and healing, not blame. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.